Well, the Sens may have handed the Leafs their first playoff series win since dial-up internet. The playoff season is not over in Ottawa just yet. The Chargers are going to suit up tonight against Montreal, and if their defense is half as steady as the spring market's been, well, we'll be in good shape. What's up, guys? Tony from Good Story here with your April 2025 market update. So typically in April, we would be smack dab in the middle of spring. We'd be seeing a ton of transaction volumes, a lot of buyers, a lot of new listings coming to the market. Obviously, this year hasn't been exactly what we probably thought it was going to be going into January, but here we are. Needless to say, the federal election is over. Congrats to Mark Carney on forming a liberal minority government. Really hoping that brings some stability into May, into June, and into July. Kind of making a little bit of a crystal ball prediction here. I do think we're going to have a bit of a late spring market. So let's say, spring market starts in the coming weeks, and it's going to bleed a little bit into the summer months. It wouldn't surprise me if we see consistent transaction and volume numbers right into July and even August. But back to April. This year we saw about 1,300 homes switch hands this past month. That's down 11% year over year. It's much slower than we anticipated for and that we saw in 2024. Now that being said, there's still people out there that are buying and selling properties. I just don't think that we're seeing that spring frenzy that we're used to seeing in April. But that being said, it is creating a little bit of breathing room on both sides of the table. In terms of product type, detached homes are actually up about 2% month over month, but townhomes and condos are pretty lagging. These are not crazy kind of jumps in equity that we see year over year, but it's kind of a give and take, a bit of back and forth because everything's kind of been fluctuating up and down month to month. I think it'll be really interesting to see where the numbers go in May. Will we see some stability? Will we see some optimism from buyers? Will we see more sellers bring their property to market? Will we see prices start to tick up? It's hard to say, but I'm optimistic given that we have a new federal government with a strong mandate to deal with, all these outside factors that are affecting us at a local level. Let me address the elephant in the room for a second here. We have buyers asking us all the time, Tony, will prices come down? It just seems like the market's kind of slowed, it's kind of stalled. Like, when will we see those prices come down and then we're gonna get into the market? The reality is we still have a supply problem. We're not building enough homes fast enough. And if you look at some of the platforms that a lot of these campaigns are run on, they were throwing out, in my opinion, ridiculously high numbers that sound good to the ear, but are not necessarily realistic on paper. I don't foresee that issue being solved in the next month, year, 5 years, perhaps even decade. As long as the demand is outpacing the supply, prices are going to remain steady. And to back that up, even though sales volume was down, the number of new listings was also down, meaning sellers were not bringing their homes to market. Maybe they're waiting to sell, waiting to see what happens with the federal election, waiting for that optimism from buyers to come back to the table. So new listings are down, inventory actually shrunk as well. So, what was already on the market is getting absorbed, although we're still in a kind of a balanced market. The sales to new listing ratio is sitting at about 50%. So no one's got, massive amounts of leverage over the other one. Buyers and sellers are kind of at an equal playing field, which means you have opportunity on both sides, but you also need to be creative and you need to be realistic with your approach, regardless of what side of the table you're on. But it's not all bad, ladies and gentlemen. We did see the Sens make a good pushback against the Leafs, but we do have the Ottawa Charge. They're going to start their playoff run tonight against Montreal. Go down to Bank Street, have a good time on Charge Avenue, support local businesses, support the team, and then we'll see you next month for the May update. If you have any questions about buying and selling in the market, what that looks like on both sides of the table, what a balanced market looks like depending on what properties you're looking at, reach out to us. The team is here and happy to help.